Hi, everyone. Hoping that you all are doing well. This is Dr. Tracy McCarthy. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion. This is a discussion that is actually a part of a series that we will be doing to address this more fully. We're going to be addressing the topic of Hebrew Israelite theology of misogyny. As this is an introductory discussion, we're just going to be addressing the topic of misogyny or hatred in this particular discussion. We are also going to address dynamics related to this direct hatred of females and internalized hatred of females. And so, with respect to direct, we are talking about male hatred of females. With respect to internalized, we are talking about females who have hatred for females. But in terms of the umbrella, we are talking about Hebrew Israelite theology of misogyny specifically, and this includes both male and female exhibitions of this misogyny. Now, of course, misogyny or hatred of females is not something that is peculiar to Hebrew Israelites. Of course, we see this dynamic going on throughout Scripture, first off, and then we also see manifestations of it as a part of the Abrahamic umbrella in general. And so you see lots of manifestations of misogyny with respect to those who fit under that Abrahamic paradigm. What we also notice when looking at this dynamic with respect to Hebrew Israelites in the Americas specifically and mainland America, so we're specifically talking about mainland America here, there is a specific type of misogyny going on. And it is specific to what would be considered brown females who are American. What also stands out is that there are specific types of brown females who are American that are at the center of this whole dynamic. And so it's indigenous American females and Creole American females. And so what we have going on here is a hatred for those who are the daughters of the bloodline. So they have a birthright according to bloodline in terms of America. And then those who are jus soli, so the ones that are born in America. But there is a specific focus on these particular females with also a generalized attitude with respect to misogyny. But again, there is this focus. And the question is why? The first question is why the misogyny in the first place? And then the second question is why this particular collective of females have been singled out for this special expression of emotion or this special feeling or special relationship. And so again, we are talking about brown female American, whether we're talking about indigenous or American Indian or Creole American. And with respect to Creole American, what we are talking about are entities that are mixed or blended with this American identity. Now, for this discussion, we are going to take a Socratic approach, meaning we are going to be asking questions. Part of the discussion is trying to get a better understanding regarding what is going on. It's very difficult to approach something or try to address something or deal with something, heal something, correct something if you don't understand what that something happens to be. And you also have to be able to identify it. You have to be able to give a name to it. And so with respect to hatred, the first question is why? Why is this a part of Hebrew Israelite theology? Why is misogyny a part of the theology? Why does it seem almost very central to the theology, quite frankly? And why is there a specific type of hatred for such a specific collective of females, very specifically brown, female, American, indigenous, or Creole? Why is this going on? And not only, again, is it going on with respect to sort of this direct misogyny, but there's also an internalized misogyny that is going on. Now, when we are talking about hatred, we are talking about a number of expressions. And so there have been expressions noted of abomination. There have been expressions of animosity, aversion, repulsion, basic loathing for females, despising females, detesting females, expressions of utter disgust, disdain. There's also this dynamic of dislike, simply not liking females, not having feelings of affinity. While many people assert that being a Hebrew Israelite is about genealogy, that's not the way that individuals become or identify as a Hebrew Israelite. For the most part, it is selection, it is self selection, self identification as a Hebrew Israelite. This can be said for every entity that is identifying as Abraham. Okay, so we're not just talking about Hebrew Israelite, we are talking about the various collectives under that Abrahamic umbrella. Generally speaking, individuals cannot and do not show a genealogy line tracing them specifically to Abraham. And we are talking about both male and female. And so what we have largely is a dynamic of self-selection. And so what's going on in terms of self-selection, that certain people are drawn to this theology of misogyny? Where's it coming from? When did it start? Why would individuals be coalescing around this particular dynamic? And again, this is not just males that we are talking about. We are talking about a number of females that also subscribe to this theology of misogyny. And when we're talking about females, we are not talking about other hatred. We are talking about a form of self-hatred. And so what is the self-animosity all about? What is the self-aversion, the self-repulsion? What is that all about? What is being disgusted with self all about? What is this dislike all about? And why is this central to this form of spirituality? Of course, if we have answers to these questions related to Hebrew Israelites, we'll have a better understanding of some of these manifestations that are under that whole Abrahamic umbrella. So we will understand other spiritual traditions and why theology of misogyny is central in many ways to a number of dynamics that we see going on with these various spiritual traditions or religious traditions. Now, when we are talking about this misogyny, what has been seen, what has been noted are various manifestations. And so there are cognitive manifestations. There are mindsets. There are cognitive schemas that are being manifested. There are all sorts of thoughts that go along with this misogyny theology. There are also emotions that appear to be tied to these cognitions. And then there are these attitudes that go along with it, these dispositions. And then, of course, there are various behavioral manifestations that are tied to this misogyny theology. And so those are the things that we are going to consider to get a better understanding of this theology of misogyny that is going on and that appears to be growing. Because we are primarily seeing these manifestations in adults, the question arises related to when did this all start? So we know we've got a self-selection dynamic going on. But the question is, where is this coming from? What is the root of this? The root is not the scripture, because the scripture is something that is sought out, okay? And so the root is somewhere else. And what we are seeing is the fruit. And so the question is, what is the root of all of this? Is this a childhood root? Most likely it is. Is this an adolescent root? Did this, spring up during adolescence? Did this come about in young adulthood? Where is this coming from? Why would individuals or collectives of individuals have disdain for basically half of humanity? What purpose does it serve? So we're talking about a suffering dynamic now. We're talking about a pathos. We're talking about a form of pathology. And so what purpose is this suffering serving? Because you can be assured that anyone who is filled with hatred for large collectives of people are not in a happy space. And those who are feeling hatred for self, they are also not in a happy space. And so the question is, what's the root of this unhappiness that is now manifesting itself as hatred for others or hatred for self? As we wrap this part of the discussion up, I want to point out a couple of things. One is that the discussion has to be bidirectional. In other words, it can't simply be me asking the questions or me providing the answers. It has to be you also providing questions and you also providing answers. And so collectively, we can come to hopefully a better understanding of what is going on, what has been going on, and where this thing seems to be going. There are a number of dynamics going on, and one thing that has been noted is that this theology of misogyny, even when we are not talking about Hebrew Israelites, this is a narrative that is pushed in terms of social media. And so this is something that apparently whoever it might be, the algorithm wants this message to be out there. This is a message that is pushed, and it comes from various directions, not again just coming from this Hebrew Israelite theology of misogyny. There are lots of theologies of misogyny that are floating around with different collectives. And so there are a number of dynamics going on here. So there are a number of questions to ask and a number of answers to pursue with respect to this dynamic. But we're going to just start off with the basic question of why. Not only is knowledge power, knowledge is the foundation for understanding and wisdom.